first quarter is usually the time when the fewest number of people buy tickets. That wasn't the case at Will Rogers this year. Ticket sales were up 20% over last year, and an airport spokesman thinks he knows why.
I think we'd have to consider the low unemployment rate. More people have more jobs and therefore more money and therefore more travel.
Other factors that encouraged people to come aboard the last few months were the airlines' price wars for March and April. The 2-for-1 deals offered by Braniff and American, along with price specials on other airlines, accounted for 20% of the sales boost. Students leaving on spring break were another factor. Morton thinks it's important to point out the sales in relation to two major air disasters. The crash at Washington's National Airport and another in Boston hasn't changed people's belief, he says, that flying is still the safest way to travel. Ted Brown, Action 4 at Will Rogers World Airport.
Before the cries of surprise and splendor over what the Easter Bunny has brought, there are those monumental decisions of getting just the right candy for that special someone. And candy is what most of us will find in our Easter baskets.
And we've got 6 little bunnies. 1470, 1470, and 1930.
The Easter Bunny is responsible for running up an annual tab of thousands of dollars. The rabbits hop through town cost an average of $12 for each basket he leaves. And for those of us who play the part of the bunny this time of year, we'll spend over $20 in Easter delights.
I think they're too high, but then everything is too high. And if you're going to build up your own Easter basket, it's just about as cheap to go ahead and buy the whole basket with the eggs in it and the animals, if you want to spend that much.
The Easter Bunny brings darling baskets and not dollar bills. But despite the economics of Easter, most kids will still find that the Easter Bunny did come to town. Debbie Mash, Action 4.
There are kids.
Day from the Oklahoma City Zoo, and we want to thank you for coming out. Thank you very much.
At about 3:30 this morning, firemen were called out to the Monticello apartment building on Northwest 21st. Smoke was billowing out of the top-story windows, and a blaze could be seen in the basement area. All of the residents escaped without injury except for this elderly woman. She's been taken to St. Anthony's Hospital. She appears to be suffering from smoke inhalation. Some residents in the building said they were asleep when the fire apparently broke out.
Well, about 20 minutes, half an hour ago, I was sleeping, and I heard some noise, like some pipes rattling and somebody hollering. And I thought it was somebody fighting, so I laid there for maybe another 30 seconds, and it got louder, and I just got out of bed real quick, and I went to my back door, and these people were hanging out the window. And they said, get us a ladder, get us a ladder. So I opened my door, and the smoke just came pouring in. And
over a dozen firemen were on the scene and had the blaze well under control in about 20 minutes. Fire Chief Phil Cooksey says it appears the fire is arson and was set among some paper boxes in the corner of the basement. Though the blaze was contained to that area, the entire building was heavily damaged by smoke and heat. The investigation will continue in this morning's fire at the Monticello apartment building. Carol Lambert, Action 4 AM.
the outside, it doesn't look too tough, but once you get into the forms, it gets worse. Just trying to decide what forms you need can be confusing enough, but you do need to get it all straightened out pretty soon, because the deadline for filing, if you owe any money, is midnight Thursday. People are pouring into the I.R.S. office looking for forms and last-minute advice. Many of these people are here to get the automatic extension form, which puts off the deadline till June 15th. It's good for a delay, but doesn't mean you don't have to pay.
If they send in the form and they have a tax liability, which means they owe tax, they need to send in at least 90% of what their total tax will be with that form.
There are about 500 forms available. Only about 20 of them are commonly used. If you have any questions about which ones you need, someone will be around to tell you. There are even classes available to explain how to fill them out, but you'd better get them filled out soon, because the government is charging the market rate of 20% interest on late payments this year. Ted Brown, Action 4 at the I.R.S. office.
Business is fine. As you see, though, I'm still hanging out at the university.
Anybody who has driven southbound on the Broadway Extension at Northwest 63rd Street lately knows it can be a headache. That section of road on the extension has been closed since April 5th. But with any luck at all, things should be back to normal by the end of next week. Many motorists have decided waiting in a long line of slow-moving traffic is not for them. So several drivers have sort of created their own new road. Most times this doesn't help get through the detour any faster. Crews have been working overtime to get the overhead bridge back into good shape. A truck hit two steel beams while passing under the bridge last fall. The repair bill will total nearly $40,000, and investigators are still looking for the truck driver, as well as other vehicles that are doing heavy damage to public property.
We've replaced or repaired about 9 round over the state, all the way from the Kansas line down to Ardmore and east over as far as Shakota, but it's been quite a problem lately. There's a damaged bridge over on May Avenue where Northwest Highway goes under it that will have to be repaired later on. I don't know when the city will let the contract on it.
Sure, it's a hassle for motorists while the bridge is being repaired on the Broadway Extension. But what you probably didn't think about was your tax dollars and my tax dollars have to pay to get the job done. City and state officials want to stress if you ever see a vehicle that damages a bridge or a road, by all means report it to make sure the right person pays for the repairs. Ed Stewart, Action 4 on the Broadway Extension. The rush is on to get tax returns in before midnight. Many of the individuals and corporations that wait until the last minute tend either to owe Uncle Sam money or just don't put taxes on the top of their priority list. Even with all the technology available, nothing can replace people figuring out other people's taxes. Accountants say a lot of the paperwork now is asking for extra time to file taxes. A common problem still seems to be not holding on to important receipts during the year. And what are the chances of being audited?
Your chances of getting audited have to do with the kind of return that you file. The Internal Revenue Service audits something less than 2% of the total returns, but that's not totally a random sample. They do use computer programs themselves to select high-risk tax returns, so it's what's reported on the return itself that determines your chances of being audited.
Just because it's April 15th, that doesn't mean that taxes are now history if you've paid them for this year. Actually, you haven't earned anything yet, not until Freedom Day. In other words, everything you've earned at the start of this year to May 5th will still go to the government in taxes. After that, your paycheck is yours. Ed Stewart, Action 4 in downtown Oklahoma City.
Go.
Next thing we know, there's an argument that ensues between him and his wife, and supposedly he picks up a bottle and breaks it over her head, this young lady's head.
Oklahoma City police respond to hundreds of domestic fights a week. In many cases, husbands end up beating their wives without mercy. Sometimes a couple can resolve their problems, and other times a fight becomes a routine event. Police end up more often than not first a referee and then an instant marriage counselor.
So I'm coming home, and I walk up the stairs and I walk into a full slap. It's that kind of crap that I can't take.
Police say battered women are oftentimes their own worst enemy by refusing to prosecute the man who beats them, which makes themselves available for even more beatings.
We'll go through filing the charge, and getting him filed maybe in a state court even. And then a week later, the woman calls and says that her and her husband is reconciled with each other and they're back together and she wants to drop charges. And here's where the officers or the detective has spent his time and effort, getting the evidence together to file the charge and getting it filed in the county, and then she decides not to do it.
A battered woman is not a pretty sight. They have been hit not only with fists, but with objects like lamps and chairs. The crime is considered a misdemeanor and carries a $100 fine or 10 days in jail for the first offense. Police say the number of battered women in Oklahoma City is growing. Women who choose to stay in a home where they are being beat will oftentimes be killed or pushed to the point of killing the batterer. The director of a battered women's shelter would like to see police arrest offenders, regardless of if a formal complaint is signed.
This police officer comes in, and if he says, he can defuse the situation, but then he has to say, hey, it's not okay for you to hit this woman. You cannot hit this woman. And even if the man says, well, she did all kinds of things to aggravate me, that's okay. You need to do something else, but it is not okay to hit your wife or to batter her or to hit anybody, and we're not going to allow it, and you're going to be arrested.
Battered women who escape with their children to the shelter in Oklahoma City may have some hope on the horizon. With help from the district attorney's office and police, men who beat their wives may be given a choice soon. Either seek professional counseling or go behind bars. Ed Stewart, Action 4.
Each year, the Cub Scouts of Pack 4 tackle the 2-block-long Larchmont Drive hill.
Okay, Brooksy.
The boys and their scout leaders have spent months fine-tuning their Soapbox Derby racers. Now it's race day. The more hardened competitors know this hill well. They've been here before.
Don't mess me up.
3, 2, 1, drop.
So what are you thinking about right now?
Wrecking. I think about wrecking.
Have you wrecked sometime in the past?
No, I don't want to. I don't want to wreck, and I think about not wrecking.
The gravity-powered machines take the boys 2 blocks in 40 seconds. Some scouts handle the speed better than others. Winners receive trophies or ribbons.
Go, Clay!
Other finishers receive encouragement.
Lean down! Lean forward!
The boys learn lessons about living from these races. They learn about winning and losing.
Way to go!
But mostly, they learn how to have a good time. Scott Wallace, Action 4 in Nichols Hills.
It's hard to say where a suspect will be locked up in Canadian County. Sometimes prisoners are taken to the county jail, but only to be transferred to the Reno City Jail later on, because it's supposed to be more secure. The county jail is outdated and presents problems when holding prisoners that may be a security risk. 50-year-old Ernest Ray Brooks escaped from the city jail this weekend, but was a county prisoner at the time. He's considered dangerous, and he's still at large. County officials say they would like to do away with transferring prisoners to the city jail, but think that's not going to be easy, since the county jail is in such poor shape. It was built before statehood, and although there have been some renovations, the jail is still substandard. The sheriff is doubtful that corrections officials will let the jail operate much longer, and he thinks a new facility is the only answer.
Floor space-wise, it's inadequate. We can hold 41 prisoners in this jail. That includes upstairs and downstairs. As far as bed space is concerned, of course, there are only 3 cells in the jail that can be closed off by themselves. The rest of it is considered a bullpen type jail. It's so old that it does not meet the standards today. It is meeting them right at the present time, but we cannot meet them in the future.
This building is starting to look like a landmark in El Reno. There have been several bond elections in Canadian County to build a new jail, but the people have voted them down every time. Right now, the county commissioners and the sheriff's office are working on plans to build a new jail. But unless they can come up with some funding, this building will probably stand for another 79 years. Ed Stewart, Action 4 in El Reno.
Attorneys Mike Gasaway and Carl Hughes came to the county courthouse to file the suit on behalf of 3 taxpayers, Pat Murphy, Virginia Miller, and Jerry Reagan. The suit wants a judge to determine the amount of money the school board wastefully spent. At issue are the following: cash contributions allegedly received by School Superintendent Dr. Tom Pezat to be used for a campaign supporting a $32 million bond issue. Improper notice of when and where the bond election was to occur. Improper advertising, alleging that the school board used taxpayers' money to campaign for the bond issue by mailing out self-serving information to school patrons. This may be the first lawsuit of its kind against the school board because some taxpayers are angry.
In essence, the taxpayers are saying that we're fed up with the Board of Education using the taxpayers' funds for their own political purposes, using it not in the best interest of the taxpayers, and they're going to see to it that the money is going to be properly used, and that the monies that have been improperly used are reimbursed to the taxpayers. They're just not going to stand for it anymore. They're kind of like Eddie Childs. They're mad, and they're going to do something about it.
Bella Shaw, Action 4 at the county courthouse.
Nearly 3,000 prospective farmers and their families gathered at the Myriad Convention Center for the opening of the state's 56th annual convention of the Future Farmers of America. The 56-year history makes the Oklahoma chapter the oldest in the country. That's a point of pride for the young men and women who plan to carry on not only a tradition, but the business of one of the state's largest industries. The Oklahoma chapter of the FFA represents around 18,000 people across the state. The convention will continue until Thursday night, when the members will elect new state officers. The meetings at the Myriad Convention Center are open to the public, and the Future Farmers of America hope that Oklahoma Cityans will drop in and take a look at the future of Oklahoma agriculture and its businessmen. Charles Schnitzer, Action 4, at the Myriad.
National chapter recognition programs.
The Henryetta Human Rights Committee and members of law enforcement officials in Okmulgee County have been at odds for months. Up until now, many people considered it nothing more than mudslinging. But today, members of the committee came to the state capitol. They say they have enough evidence to put a lot of people behind bars. It was just a few months ago when tension between Henryetta Police and some of the town's residents started to build. The city's Human Rights Committee charged the police department with beating up and sometimes killing suspects. They claim to have pictures of people beaten by Henryetta Police and say the Okmulgee District Attorney's Office would not look into the allegations. Police deny the charges and deny harassing committee members. Now committee leader Ross Hullett is bringing what he says will prove the brutality charges. The evidence was handed over to the State Attorney General's office. Members of a grand jury will examine Hullett's secret evidence next week. Now that Hullett has turned over evidence to the State Attorney General's office, he feels he's going to be harassed even more by law enforcement officials in his county. But he says he won't stop his fight until, in his opinion, justice is done. Ed Stewart, Action 4 at the State Capitol. It took less than 2 hours to seat a grand jury at the Okmulgee County Courthouse. The Henryetta Human Rights Association has been after a grand jury investigation for months now. The panel will be looking into allegations of brutality and harassment by law enforcement agencies in this county. The association claims Henryetta Police are running a Gestapo-like operation. Some residents told Action 4 police are routinely arresting and harassing the citizens that don't agree with police policy. Association members say they took pictures of people brutally beaten to the Okmulgee District Attorney's office and told officials the beatings came from Henryetta police officers. When the association felt the sheriff and the district attorney's office would not help them, they took the evidence to the Attorney General's office and now say even more people are coming forward to the grand jury.
Within a week, we should start seeing some results because the information that we know that is available to the grand jury, it's cut and dried. It's right or wrong, black and white. So we feel that we ought to start getting immediate results.
The jury of 12 with 3 alternates will first tour the Okmulgee County Jail and then move on to the Henryetta City Jail. It's hard to say at this point just how long it will take the panel to look at the facilities. After that, other allegations against law enforcement officials must be investigated. Some county officials say they welcome the grand jury to clear the air. The jury invited Action 4 to join them in their chore, but Okmulgee County Sheriff Gene Rice decided he'd rather close the doors to cameras. Ed Stewart, Action 4 at the Okmulgee County Courthouse.
A group of McAlester civic leaders had asked the Justice Department to build a $35 million alien deportation center like this one in their town. They figured the project would pump more than $12 million each year into McAllister's economy. An equally determined group was formed to oppose the project. Both sides haggled for 8 months over whether or not the town should seek the center. A binding vote on the question was set for May 25th, but all of that was suddenly blown out of the water today by a phone call. The Justice Department told project proponents they had dropped McAlester from consideration for the center site.
No matter what the opponents say about it, it was a good thing for the McAlester area. It would have been a good thing for Pittsburgh County. It would have certainly reduced the chronic unemployment and underemployment that exists in the area. I'm disappointed.
Obviously, I'm glad to hear the news.
Opponents of the center had a different reaction.
We don't want people to feel that we are opposed to growth, certainly not. In fact, one reason we were concerned about this was that we were afraid that it might tend to stunt our growth in other areas. In other words, it might make our community less attractive to individuals or companies that might be looking at the area.
The deportation center debate has divided this town for the past year or so. Now that the Justice Department has taken that decision out of these people's hands, it's time, as one old-timer put it, for this town to reunite. Scott Wallace, Action 4 in downtown McAlester.
Some downtown businesses say Broadway has become nothing more than one long bus terminal. Hundreds of people transfer from one bus to another on Broadway. The street was selected after Mass Trans determined through surveys that using Broadway would best serve its riders. But downtown businesses complain with a dozen buses on one street, congestion soon appears. Some downtown workers say the crowded street also makes parking even more of a nuisance. Mass Trans moved its main transfer point to Broadway after several public hearings. Still, business owners feel the move was a bad one.
What is the point of planting all the trees in the median on Broadway if you're going to have a row of buses out there which prohibits the pedestrians from even seeing or enjoying the trees or being able to interact with each other? If you look at any major city in the United States where the bus terminal is located, it is not the kind of area in which you have the highest quality of traffic or people activities.
Prior to us rescheduling the buses, we had more buses on Broadway than at any one time than we have there today. The only thing we have added to that is the people who are now on the sidewalks waiting to make transfers on the buses. We have to assume that the problem is with the number of people that are congregating in that area.
Those for and against the bus transfer system will have a chance to voice their opinions Friday at the City Council chambers. Patillo says the 10 a.m. meeting will hopefully lead to a compromise. Ed Stewart, Action 4 in downtown Oklahoma City.